Good morning and afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to today's session, The Coaching Solution. My name is Max Smith. I'm the Director of Communications for 501c Services. 501 is a 100% employee-owned company. We're in our 40th year. We provide full-service unemployment outsourcing programs and other human resources-related services to more than 3,000 nonprofits. Our programs include the 501c Agencies Trust, which offers comprehensive unemployment management solutions, and 501c HR Services, which is a confidential resource to help nonprofits walk through difficult human resources issues. Many of you on today's program are already working with us, and we're very much glad that you do. Before I turn our program over to Claire and Jules, I'm going to cover a little bit of housekeeping, see if I can answer some initial questions before the ladies take over. First of all, if you have questions, this is an interactive presentation. You've come to the right place. Claire and Julie want to hear all the questions. So please use that chat, that question box, fill it full of your thoughts and needs, and they'll be glad to get to you as much as they can. Today's program is certified for SHRM credit. If you need that credit at the end of the program, just fill out our little survey and I will send that to you. And also the materials are already in the handouts box of your GoToWebinar browser. We have a copy of the slides that the ladies will be going over today, and there's also a supplement that Claire has provided for you. I will also send those items to you via email later today. So as I begin to hand this, one more thing, we have we'll be talking to Julie and Claire. Julie works with me. She's a senior HR specialist here at 501c Services, and Claire runs Claire Laughlin Consulting. And while I hand this off to them, they will begin to introduce themselves. And Claire, I'll give you control here as you go.
No problem.
Thank you, Mac. Good morning, everyone. We're really glad to have you here today. And as Mac said, my name is Julie Gilbertson, and I work at 501c Services. I also have almost 30 years of nonprofit experience, so lots of respect for all of you leaders in the industry. I'm really delighted to be here today with Claire. I've appreciated, respected, and admired Claire for a really long time. I think, Claire, we first met when I walked into one of your college courses on leadership, and that was it for me. I was like, okay, this is awesome, and I soon recommended you for speaking engagements with the board I was on and work with the nonprofit I was working with. Fast forward to today, here we are. So I'm very delighted to have you, and Claire so graciously volunteered her time and expertise today. So I wanted to thank you for being here and let you say a little bit about yourself before we get started.
All right, thanks, Jules. Okay, hi everybody, I'm Claire Laughlin, and I am the founder of Claire Laughlin Consulting. I'm a consultant, speaker, and trainer. And what I do is I go into organizations, and I like to say that I help people create happy and high energy workplaces. So I love to work with leaders on leadership development, team development, and creating the culture that they want so that people feel empowered and engaged and they bring their best to work. And so part of that, of course, is what we're going to talk about today, workplace coaching. And what a powerful skill set coaching is for leaders and managers to create so much engagement and empowerment in their workplaces. So I'm super excited to be here with you today. Thank you so much for having me, Jules. I appreciate it. And I'm really looking forward to getting into it.
Me too. I'm excited. So thank you. Well, so Claire, you have a coaching class coming up, right? And that's open to the public?
Yes.
Wonderful. Well, before you talk about that, what is coaching? Tell us a little bit about what coaching is.
Well, coaching is it's a relationship between it's a relationship between people. Okay, the way we're going to talk about it is we're going to talk about workplace coaching, which is generally driven by a supervisor or manager, and it's sort of a directional conversation. It's very supportive. In fact, I have let me share my screen if that's okay. I'm going to show you a definition of workplace coaching. Okay, how's that look? Does that look good? Okay, so workplace coaching, it's a deliberate and ongoing helping process. So meaning that it's not just any old conversation. It can be, you can coach anytime, but we like to think about coaching programs and helping an organization become a coaching workplace by being deliberate about coaching at least 4 times a year. So we'll talk about this later, Jules, but I think one of the things that I've been really involved with in the last 10 years is helping organizations move away from their traditional annual performance appraisal and move toward a quarterly coaching model. Okay, so I don't want to get too far off my definition, but it's deliberate. Like we coach and we coach toward a goal. You know, we coach toward the outcomes we're trying to create, or we coach toward the culture we're trying to create, something like that. So workplace coaching, it's deliberate, it's an ongoing helping process, and it's intended to enable success, to inspire a change of some sort, and to promote real transformation. The thing that I love about coaching is that you stick with it so that it actually results in change. And that's so different than our annual performance appraisal, which has kind of been shown to not do much when it comes to making actual change and improvements in performance. So it involves a lot of skills. It involves being a really good listener. And that's interesting because, you know, like so many people think that they're really good listeners, and you ask a manager and you go like, how good of a listener are you? And they'll rate themselves pretty high. And then you'll ask all the people around them, how good of a listener is that person? And they'll rate them pretty low. So it's funny how we have this disconnect a little bit with that in general, not everybody, but in general. So we really need to practice listening well and being really curious, because those are really core foundational skills for coaching. And then it also involves setting goals. So it's helpful for an organization because it helps them get clear on what it is that people should be doing, clarifying those expectations. And then after that, it's about identifying the support and the resources necessary to achieve the goals, and then regularly following up. So I like to say this in other words. In other words, it's a directional, curious conversation that leads to a plan.
Nice.
So that's about it.
Nice. So you can't just set it and forget it. This is an ongoing process.
That's right.
I think sometimes people forget that piece, right?
Right. And that's interesting too, because it's one of the things that people go, oh, coaching is going to take so much time. You know, we get questions about that a lot. Coaching is going to take a lot of time. How am I going to make the time for it? But these conversations don't have to be really long. We do recommend a longer conversation at least once a year for real goal setting and stuff like that. But then after that, those conversations can be quite short as you get accustomed to them. And the time you save in not having to fix things that are broken is extraordinary. So
sweet. Yeah, sounds great. So tell us why you want to teach this course now. Why is it so important right now?
You know, as a consultant, I go into lots of different organizations, and I talk to lots of leaders. Jules, you know, you're in one of my leadership courses right now, and I think we've got at least 85 leaders from a variety of organizations in that particular class. I'm always talking to leaders, and I know a lot of leaders are suffering right now. Burnout is incredibly high. Staffing levels are low. People are exhausted. They're fried, you know. Goals have been just like changing constantly. Everybody's in reactivity mode. It's hard to get people to look forward, you know. It's more about just like what's happening right now. We've kind of gotten into that habit almost. Morale is low. Engagement is so low. People are feeling isolated. Now, I mean, this isn't true in every workplace. In fact, I like to look for workplaces where this isn't true and go in and look at what they're doing differently. And I'll tell you, one of the things they're doing differently is that they're coaching. They're really dedicated to establishing the clarity and connection that comes from coaching. And that's why this came up, because it's the one skill set. There's so many things you can do, right? You can do team building, you can refocus your goals, you can work on just kind of reconnecting with people on a human level, all that stuff. All of those things are part of coaching. And so it just made sense to me. I was like, you know what? It just makes a lot more sense. And then the last thing I'll say about that, Jules, is that a lot of people had a hard time transitioning to how will I manage differently when I'm managing remotely, right? And we were in this emergency, like, just figure it out real fast. And a lot of people never really built the skill set to manage their teams well remotely. And so I've been teaching this coaching curriculum for many years, and it just was time to refresh it and to bring it into this new kind of environment where so many of us are leading remotely, and to make it applicable to that. And so this class is going to include not just your basic coaching skill, but how do you set goals, maintain connection, make sure that your engagement is high, make sure you're motivating, all in that remote environment. So that's what this is about. I'm really excited.
Well, and some of the workplaces have this hybrid, right? So some are remote, some are on site. So how do you keep that connected? So this is really great timing.
Yeah.
We've heard a lot about this. We have an HR hotline and our members call in, and this is, very good timing because they're facing a lot, everything that you said, exactly. And it's just been a tough time. I think people thought this pandemic would be, a couple of months, we'll be back to normal, right? And now here we are 2 years later. So this is wonderful. Thank you. I think it's a good time for us to ask our attendees if they have questions or thoughts on this, and to go into that question box and tell us what's one of the biggest challenges you're facing right now in terms of your culture, maybe the internal dynamics. Does any of this resonate with you? And give us some questions if you have some. Let us know what's going on out there. We'd love to have a conversation with you.
Absolutely. Yeah, we want to know. We're here to answer your questions too. So by all means, have those questions in there.
Yeah, great.
Nice.
Well, I know one question is just what we talked about. How do I manage to coach when not all my staff are present? What do I do with those remote workers?
Right. Yeah. Well, okay. So part of the I think one of the core things about coaching is that it's this building of a strong, connected relationship with your staff members. So coaching is generally done in a one-to-one format. So it would be, if you're remote, it would be setting aside time to specifically, get in a video channel like this, or Zoom, or Google Hangouts, or whatever, and have a quality conversation about, like, how's things going, and what are you working on, and how are those goals coming along, and what can I do to help you? It's this consistency it's a consistent kind of level of connection with your staff. And it's also a consistent drawback to what are we working toward together. So there's really two things always going on in a coaching conversation. There's connection and there's clarity. Okay, there's connection and there's clarity. So I would say in a remote environment, you're doing that one-on-one with your staff, but you're also holding more powerful team meetings where people, and we're going to talk about this in the coaching class, it's a special kind of bonus that we don't normally cover in coaching, but we need to talk about it now. And that those team meetings are about, like, setting up your goals and getting energy behind your goals and mapping out, like creating work plans where you map out who's going to do what. And then you just utilize that work plan to help you track through to the end of a project. This sounds simple to people that have been doing it. this sounds simple to people who are already using kind of project management type thought processes in their teams. But for people who haven't been doing that because they've been live with each other, they may not have needed to create a sort of digital work plan that they go back and check in on. This can be complicated and a little mysterious. So we are going to clarify all of that and give you a roadmap for how to set these things up. It's actually not that complicated. If you could make it complicated, but we don't do anything complicated if we can avoid it. So simple and easy, easy to put into play.
Great. I have a couple more really wonderful questions. So staff turnover is high due to this pandemic, as we know, right? This also impacts who to coach and invest in. So how do you navigate through that? Great question.
Oh, okay. So, Jim Collins has this saying that always comes to mind for me about getting the right people on the bus. Do you know that? Jim Collins is great. Says you got to get the right people on the bus. And then you got to get them in the right seats is another part of it, right? So I would make sure as leaders, and this may or may not be true, I'd love to hear from our attendees about this, but this may or may not be true for all of you, but as leaders, we tend to put a lot of effort and energy into the lowest performers and not as much as we should into the highest performers or the ones that are the cultural fit, right? So we sometimes we hire the wrong people and then we put a lot of effort and energy into trying to get them to fit the culture that we want to create. And so of course you are where you are. So if you've got people on the bus that need to be a better cultural fit or something like that, there are ways that you can work with that. I'm working with a team right now and we're doing this. We're like putting a stake in the ground and saying, this is the kind of team we're going to be. And you're inviting people into that conversation and into that way of being. And you give them, a good solid period of support and time to become part of that operating culture. And if they choose not to be part of that operating culture, then it's probably better for everyone all around if they go find employment elsewhere. I know that sounds really hard, especially in low staffing times, but you spend a lot of effort trying to get the wrong person trained to be the right person. And so I think it's important to have a strategy for how you make a transition to the kind of culture that you want. And we have a whole progression, a sort of a process for helping teams do that. And so I'd love to help with that.
Excellent.
Yeah, I got a question there. How do you read me the question again, Jules, will you?
Oh, there's so many good questions in here, actually. So the one you just spoke to, staff turnover is high due to the pandemic. This also impacts who to coach and invest in and how to navigate through. There's a couple more that, there's several good ones. There's a couple more that talk about, how, time to train and coach. So, everybody is strapped, they're burnt out, right? They're having a hard time developing themselves, let alone teams. So probably the leaders, right? And then there's a couple comments about maybe newer leaders who might be younger than the staff they're trying to manage and how to get respect and overcome that struggle, right? If people feel that younger leader is really experienced enough to tell them and help them, lead the way.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about that for a minute, because people often think of coaching as sort of this hierarchical relationship, right? Here's the coach and here's the staff person that they're coaching. I'm coaching you, therefore I'm the person that has the answers. And that's, that's not what we're trying to create. What we're trying to create is a true learning environment where two people are talking about their goals, the barriers that stand in the way of those goals, the options that they have for bridging that gap, and making plans to make that happen. Okay, so I'll just tell you a little story here about this. I used to work, for a long time. In fact, Jules, you knew me when I was working at a community college near my home. And I worked there for a long time. And I was in an interesting role as kind of a community organizer, influencer person. I was leading this partnership effort for a decade. And I was one of the younger people in the room, but I had to organize and influence all of these executives. I mean, it was kind of, it was humbling. It was very humbling, right? I had the most important people in our whole county all in a room together. You know, the counties, the superintendents, the county administrators, the city officials, the workforce development people, the educators, everybody was in the room, the president of the college. And I had to step into that role and lead those people. As probably, like I said, one of the younger people in the room, and definitely the shortest. I was definitely the shortest person in the room. But anyway, I would this kind of format is what I would use then as well. I would sit down and I'd say, well, let's talk about what our goals are. Our goals, not like, let me tell you what your goals are, but let's talk about what our shared goals are. What shared outcomes are we working toward? What do you think you could do to, what are you inspired to do to contribute to those goals? How are we going to get there? What help do you need from me? And how can we make a plan? And that is literally the same exact format that we teach in this class. It's called Grow. It's in those handouts. If you guys download those handouts from the portal there, you'll see the PDFs. And the Grow model walks us right through that. What are your goals? What's the reality now? What options do we have for bridging that gap? And what is our way forward? And so you don't have to take this sort of hierarchical approach to that. In fact, I love to talk about how you can manage up using these same skills. When somebody calls you in and they say, hey, I want you to do this project or something, you just start asking the questions. You go, well, let's talk about the goal. What's the actual goal of this project? Let me tell you a little bit about the reality. Here's some other things I have on my plate right now. I see a couple of options. What do you see as an option for making this fit? And then, okay, here's the plan. Let's move forward. It's a framework that is so powerful in so many situations. And that's one reason why I love it so much. I don't want to make it sound like it's the only thing you need, but it's close.
A great model. And I know you're going to speak more to that in today's program. So that's wonderful. We have a couple more questions. So how do you approach coaching when you're already this person's doing 3 jobs, right? They're juggling everything, and it's just, can you do it in small bits and pieces? It doesn't have to be done all at once, right?
Oh no, you can have a very effective coaching conversation in 5 minutes if you've done the work of setting up what the goals are and how you want to move forward. One of the very first things we're going to cover in this class is, like, I'm calling it, what are you coaching toward? And it's like, do you have your priorities set? So one of the things that happened during this pandemic, and we'd love to hear from you if this is true for any of you, but one of the things that happened is a lot of people never reshifted their priorities. So jobs just went from being already kind of too big to being doubly too big or triply too big. You know what I mean? Because now we were trying to do all the same stuff that we were doing before, but then all the kind of COVID response stuff and all the managing of remote employees and all this, and so many people, so many of the leaders I work with never paused and went back and went like, okay, hang on a minute. That's why we're all burned out and so exhausted, because we haven't reset. We need to reset our priorities and come back and be like, okay, team, what are we going to do this year? What's realistic with the size team we have now? And I know some of the people right now are saying, no, there's nothing I can give up. I totally hear that. I know that. But unfortunately, what happens is this. If we fall into the trap of thinking, there's nothing I can give up, I have to do everything that's on my plate. Instead of being proactive about prioritizing, something else prioritizes for us. Our burnout, our exhaustion, the fact that we lose our staff because we're not paying enough attention to them, illness, whatever. Like, that's what ends up prioritizing for us because we didn't do it proactively, right? So I'm sorry, I don't mean to be the bearer of bad news here, but I am trying to be a real voice for leaders. Step back and take a look at that portfolio of stuff that your team is working on right now. Take a good hard look at that and see if anything can be trimmed, because you've got to be able to align the amount of work that you're trying to accomplish with the actual staff and their abilities that they have. Otherwise, you're heading on a slow train to, worse problems, less staffing, people that are more burned out, people that are checked out for this reason or that, and we don't want that. So coaching doesn't have to take a lot of time. We do recommend sort of an initial startup. In fact, I can show you an annual plan model. Is that okay?
Oh, group, that'd be great.
Let me pull that up on the screen real quick. Okay, so with the annual plan, this is just a sample, okay? But here, let's just say you start in January. Now we're almost to, we're halfway through February, so this isn't quite timely. But let's just say you start in January. The team develops an annual focus. The team comes together, has a team meeting, and they develop kind of their portfolio. They map out their work quarter by quarter. They kind of figure out, in general, who's going to do what and who's going to sort of lead the charge toward this, that, and the other thing. So that's kind of what the team can do in January. And then the rest of January, February, team members or sub-teams write goals. So it's like, okay, I'm going to contribute to this outcome, and this is what we're going to do by when. And I'm a big fan of not very many goals. Like, I'd rather have you do your routine work and have just 2 or 3 strong goals over, like 1 goal a quarter even, or 1 goal a month, or, 3 goals a quarter or something like that. But to pare it down to a short time frame that you can really achieve. So people write their goals, and then that's when you have your coaching check-in. So March through June, you'd have your one-to-ones, you'd have a couple of one-to-ones with each person, sort of like, what's your plan, etc. And then in July, mid-year, bring the whole team back together and everybody shares progress, and it's a celebration, and it's also a reset. And it's like, how much have we been able to do? Were we too ambitious? What's changed? It's kind of a little bit of a reset, and then you go back to do some coaching, and at the end of the year, you bring everybody back together, you celebrate, you refresh, and you renew. Like, so I know that sounds like a lot, but it's a couple of team meetings and a couple of coaching sessions in there. And you can, of course, do it quite differently, but this is a great place to get your thinking started about how to implement a plan like this.
It's great. Yeah, that's really wonderful. I know I was in the nonprofit world when the pandemic started, and it's overwhelming for folks. And I know a lot of our nonprofit leaders are really burnt out. And just like this attendee said, doing multiple jobs, and it's like, how can I think about anything else? So that's really wonderful. Thank you for sharing that model.
Can I say one more thing about that, Jill?
Yeah.
I just want to say, how can I do one more thing? And so this is what I want you to think about if you're in that situation. You're probably already having conversations with your folks. So it may be as simple as reorienting yourself a little bit around how those conversations look or what you're doing in those conversations. It could be as simple as shifting up the way you meet with your team a little bit and the way you meet with your individuals a little bit. So I don't want people to get reluctant by thinking, oh, now I got to do another whole thing. It's more about doing what you're probably already doing just a little bit differently. It's more about that than it is about adding something new.
I think that's important. So it doesn't feel like now we're saying do everything you're doing and coach. It's trying to fold that in there, which is one of the questions spoke to, staff having 10 projects already. So take those 10 projects and maybe it's a different conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. One more good question here. How do you coach regarding low wages and this massive resignation, right? The great resignation when you have a small nonprofit. So how can you make that happen? How do you bridge that gap?
Okay, how do you coach when you have low wages or about low wages?
The question says, how do you coach regarding low wages and massive resignations in a small nonprofit?
Yeah.
So
Okay.
probably, I can imagine there's challenges, especially with people, they're jumping ship. They have a lot of choices out there, right? So
Yeah.
how can coaching help?
Okay, that's a great question. Okay, so one of the big things, and I've been reading a lot of the research that's coming out about this great resignation and what it's all really about. There was some talk about how the great resignation was really sort of people who didn't retire when the pandemic hit. And so it's all those kind of retirements that were kind of pent up for a little while and stuff like that. And there's other people saying, well, people are jumping ship because they want to work remote, they want work-life balance in a way that they didn't have before, et cetera,
Right.
And I think there's flavors of all that are true. But the thing that I think is within your control as a nonprofit leader is creating an engaged culture. Like most nonprofits attract people because of their mission, right?
Yep.
And so that's a good thing from the start because you're already attracting people who have an affinity for the mission. Now, what you want to do is create an internal work culture that creates inspiration and engagement and helps people see that they matter. Like most of us don't leave. Well, that's not true. There's a lot of reasons why people leave. Sometimes now the pandemic has made a lot of people realize, wow, I want to be closer to my family, so I'm gonna move, across the country to be there closer to my family, and that's what I need to do. So if you can accommodate me remotely, great, and if you can't, then that kind of thing. So there are a lot of reasons why people leave, but they would leave anyway, right? For those reasons at this point. So you've got your policies and you can work on your policy side of things. And then you've got your culture. And let's say that if people aren't leaving for other reasons, they want to be engaged, they want to be seen, heard, and understood, and they want to feel like they're part of something meaningful. They want to feel like they are making a difference.
Yes.
And coaching is a way, the framework of coaching is a way for us to champion the goals, the outcomes that we're getting, a person's role in those outcomes, and to really help and support them and get to know them even. If you don't know your people that well, to create those bonds with each other so that people aren't thinking about leaving. I mean, I know that at times in my life, there are reasons that people leave. Sometimes they leave because they really do need a higher salary. They just need that. And if there's no way that this organization can provide that, then you've had them for a good long period of time and maybe they can serve you in other ways. Maybe they can be on your board someday. But that may or may not keep them as an employee for a long time, right? They may need advancement opportunities that are just not available in your nonprofit, and that's something that the one reason why people leave. But even if they leave, you want them to leave with really good, strong feelings about the way they were engaged and treated, and the way they were utilized. In a sense, like the way they contributed is what I mean, more like the way that they personally made a difference, and all of that kind of thing is kind of an outcome of really good coaching. So I hope that answers the question.
Sure, absolutely. And coaching provides that opportunity for recognition too, right? So they can feel valued and, like you said, feel like a part of meeting those goals and, following that mission. And so that's all tied into it too. And I think through this pandemic, more and more folks, yes, they do need the salary. You got to put food on the table, right? Have to pay your mortgage or your rent.
Yeah.
And at the same time, they want to feel good about where they're at. So coaching helps with that whole culture. And I think it's, underrated sometimes. So we really need to keep that in mind.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, so yes, our times have been tough and we're still, riding this train. So you've talked a lot about how coaching can help. Do you want to add more about that and in what ways coaching can help?
Well, I think one of the things that we wanted to talk about a little bit is moving away from the performance appraisal and toward a coaching culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I say that is it's just really interesting. I was reading an article yesterday about how much time and investment dollar-wise is spent on performance appraisals that don't yield performance improvement, right?
Right.
And so much of what we do, so when we think about coaching really can improve performance, but it usually improves performance even before performance gets bad. So you don't even like feel the impact of the poor performance when you have a good, strong coaching culture, because you're helping a person succeed long before they fail in a coaching culture. When a person starts to struggle, it's not that we remove the struggle, because struggle is important, but we support them. We talk to them about how to solve the problem and how to move forward in alignment with our goals and with our culture and things like that. So people can get on board. And then we don't have the same kinds of performance issues that we normally have. But coaching can also help when it comes to performance issues. If you're struggling, if somebody is just not able to perform the way they're supposed to, we're going to talk specifically about when to move from a coaching model into a performance improvement plan. That's one of the modules that we're going to do in this coaching course, and we're going to talk about how to document all of that, and how to run those meetings, and how to know when or if it's time to help the person move out of the organization, or how to know when to keep them. All that is going to be part of it. But you don't have to replace your performance appraisal to adopt coaching. That is not necessary. There's kind of three ways. In fact, maybe I'll pull up a slide here real quick. Is that all right?
That's great timing.
Okay, let me show you. Okay, 3 simple choices that I'd like to sort of, offer up for creating a coaching culture. The first is super simple, and it's just simply this. It's simply add coaching skill, like train your managers and supervisors to coach, and that's it. Just support their skill development and step back and see what happens. Because the rewards for the coach are great. I mean, suddenly you have this kind of ease and connection and clarity. And it doesn't happen overnight, because there's an awkward phase as you're sort of transitioning into coaching. But if you just support them in building this skill, you're going to already start seeing improvements. So that is the simplest approach. You can also do something a little different, where you add coaching check-ins to an annual process. So you keep your appraisal, and you do that once a year, but you just add a couple of coaching check-ins, and you try to document those so that there's a process that holds people accountable for it. So you don't just tell them, okay, do your appraisal and then coach, but you say, do your appraisal, and on 3 additional occasions, we want you to set aside 15 minutes and ask these 3 questions. And we want you to write down the answers and make sure that they're either submitted to HR, or they're in your file or something, so that there's some accountability to it. And that begins the transition over to a coaching culture. They still need to have the coaching skill, because a lot of people don't. And they think they're good coaches. There's a lot of research on this, that people think that they're great coaches, but really it's sort of advice giving, sort of brushed over with some questions. So coaching is a little different that way. But number 2, add coaching check-ins to your annual process and keep your appraisal. Don't worry about getting rid of the appraisal yet. And number 3 is really the comprehensive approach. And I have 4 agencies right now who are already asking me about, help me with the scope. How are we going to get to this place where we get rid of our performance appraisals? Because they're just done with all that effort that doesn't yield the result. But in that option, you completely redesign and replace. You get a new process and new forms And it's kind of a long haul to get there. It's a change effort, but it's certainly doable. And I've done it very successfully in a couple of city governments with hundreds of employees, and it can really have amazing impacts have great impacts on, it lowers complaints, internal complaints. In one city that I worked in during the study period, which is 3 years, it completely eliminated all of there was no investigations during that period of time, none, because
That's
people
impactful.
were actually having conversations, quality conversations, long before complaints would start to originate. It even improved their standing in the community as measured by their community members. It was amazing, really quite amazing. So it can have some really good impacts.
That's awesome. I have to say that, you know, the performance evaluation or appraisals have always been tough, you know, and the leaders in the organization that I previously worked at would just, you know, we don't have time, and it just, you know, people aren't happy, they dread going to them. So if you're doing this coaching all along, I would think it'd be a much more natural process once folks get used to the idea of it.
Right.
And you know, and embrace it, and as you're sharing, there's a lot of impact. So I think that's wonderful. You know,
yeah, it's like you the performance appraisal is nice for one reason, and that is, well, there's a couple reasons. Like a lot of times increases are, you know, financial increases and stuff are tied to that performance appraisal, so you have to work out those details. But
Sure.
but basically it creates clarity, so people know what's expected of them. We
Right.
can do that with coaching. That's why you have one time a year, you have kind of a longer session where you sit down and you really make sure that there's clarity about the person's role and about their scope. And we even recommend having what we call a career conversation in that meeting, where we say, where are you headed? What are your interests? How do you want to grow and develop? Where do you see yourself in a couple of years? And if you have that conversation, then you can really help align the person's career pathway to their passions. I mean, if you want to keep people, that's how you do it, right? You help the job meet their real needs.
Right. And through coaching, you can get creative. Sometimes you can create some, you know, even in a small nonprofit, you can create some, you know, in-house promotional opportunities, or maybe you create a job that's slightly different where they have other responsibilities. So in that conversation of coaching, you can create opportunities, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I have another question. If you're,
Okay.
I know we're off the beaten path. This is so great. I love when people participate. So there's a comment that I have some staff that are not natural coaches, right? They just tend to talk the entire time, probably out of nerves, right? And they don't let the staff members speak or add input.
Yeah.
I've tried to get them to slow down and listen, but haven't found a good solution. So any advice on that, Claire?
You know, that is tough. It is tough.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I do see, and I see this in many of my training courses, is that sometimes being told by another outside person can help. Sort of like, you know, how it is at home, where if your spouse tells you something, you'll ignore it all day long. But if a friend or a neighbor tells you, you'll be like, oh yeah, you know.
Right.
But so sometimes it's having that external validation. But let me actually put it this way. You know, in our courses, one of the first things we do in this course, one of the first things we do is we help people get in touch with the experience that they personally have had when someone is coaching them. Right?
Sure.
And people speak so highly of those influencers in their own lives who have coached them and the impact it had on them. And we tease all that out. And I don't just tell them, this is how you do it. I ask them, how did the coach do that? What was the coach doing? And they'll say, the coach was a great listener. They listened more than they spoke. They were really truly present. They were really actually interested in me. And I go, how do you know that? Because they asked questions, and they engaged silence sometimes, and they just helped me find my own answers. And then I say, okay, so what was elicited in you during that conversation? And they go, oh, that person saw things in me that I didn't even see in me. I learned and I grew so much under that person's, coaching. And then we ask the really hard question. And then we go like, okay, so let's see, how do you stack up? How do you stack up to that? So that's not something for me to judge. It's go and ask people that are close to you about how you're performing on these dimensions. And that's an eye opener. So sometimes it's just hearing it from another perspective that kind of rattles the person. But I'll be honest, I gotta be honest here. It's a harder road for some than for others.
Sure.
Some people, and you'll think this about me today, I'm sure, but some people are just born to talk. And
True.
so it can be a harder road for those folks. But that doesn't mean that it's something we should not attempt. Because it is a learnable skill. It's absolutely a learnable skill. And when somebody gets the right mirror in front of them, it can really help make a difference. I take that as my personal, as my personal mandate. Like, I need to help people do that. So
have those tough conversations. Yeah, it's certainly not the most comfortable, and the other person has to be open to hearing, right, and be able to reflect. So easier said than done sometimes, but don't give up on it, right?
No.
Working. Yeah.
Jules, can we talk a little bit? Can we announce the class and then take some more questions? Would that be okay?
Yeah, perfect. Good timing for it.
Yeah, because I want everybody here to know that we're giving you a $100 discount for being here in the webinar. And if you want to join me for this Coaching for Excellence live class, that's what it's called. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, and so 501c services members or anyone here on the webinar gets $100 off. And the discount link, I said the discount link was going to be sent via email, but Mac, if you want to put it in if you want to add it there, that's fine too. It's really up to you. We'll make sure everybody gets it, but we're going to send out this link, and I'll show you what we're going to do and where we're going to go with it. So this Coaching for Excellence live class, it's 6 sessions, 6 teaching sessions over 12 weeks. So it's every other week. It starts March 16th, and it's live online. So I'll be teaching via Zoom. And everything is recorded, and there's lots of bonuses. So like I said, we have this whole bonus session all dedicated to just the performance appraisal and how to know when to move sort of from coaching to a performance improvement plan, and how to do documentation and things like that. So there's a whole bonus session on that. There's a bonus session on practice, where we come together and I help you practice and I give you feedback on your coaching skills. There's sessions on setting your priorities and stuff like that as well. Okay, so we're going to do all these foundational skills. We're going to set powerful goals. We're going to manage performance and motivate your employees and practice the GROW and other coaching methods. And we're going to do all these bonuses. Oh yeah, having hard conversations, that's a great bonus. And you can get to this class by going to ClaireLaughlinOnline.com. Claire, C-L-A-I-R-E, ClaireLaughlinOnline.com. And right up at the top, there's a little button that says Coaching for Excellence, and you click that button, and there it is. So I'm excited. I hope some of you will join me in that class, because it's going to be a lot of fun.
Very exciting. Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that, and thank you for providing the discount to those that are attending today. That's awesome. Yeah, I think it's going to be wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really great. What else do you want to share today about coaching? We've had a lot of great questions, and we can do more, but are there other parts of coaching that you'd like to share, Claire? Do you want to share more about GROW model or anything? I mean, you
talked a little bit about the macro model. I guess I can just, it's in the slide handout, the PDF, but let me just share the screen for a moment, and just so we can go over that one more time. I really want people to be able to come out of here thinking about this framework, because in your PDFs that you can download there, you've got the slide handout. So it's got this, all the slides we've shown and a couple extra that we didn't show. And it's also got, you've also got that supplement that's got all kinds of questions. So right here and now, as a result of this webcast, we want you to be able to go out and start having these conversations with people. So think about it in this way. You are a coach, so what you are doing is that you're listening, you're employing your very best listening skills, and you're getting really curious. You're not telling, you're asking. You're asking, you're not telling, okay? Just, I mean, as a general rule, try not to tell, try to ask, okay? And what you're doing with this is you're talking about the goal first. So you're asking questions about the goal. So tell me about your goal, Jules. What's your goal? And what energizes you about this goal, Jules? And what good things are going to happen if you achieve this goal? And what not so good things are going to happen if you don't achieve this goal, and stuff like that. So I'm talking with you about the goal, and I'm helping you get connected to the energy of your goal. Like, why does it matter, right? And then after we talk about that a little bit, we just sort of like shift the conversation to, okay, Jules, all right, so that goal sounds amazing. What's happening now? How come you already achieved this? What's standing in your way? And that's the reality step. Sure. And so let's just use a fitness goal, for example, or like, okay, I want to start exercising 5 days a week. Okay. So then I get to reality and I go, Jules, yeah, what's the reality now? What's keeping you from doing that now? And you might look out the window and you'll be like, well, it's 2 degrees outside, you know, or I really like to exercise outside, and, you know, et cetera. Or, you know, I'm constantly distracted with this or that, or whatever it is, doesn't matter. I'm listening. I'm just asking you questions and listening. What's happening now? What are your real challenges with this? And as you start to explore those challenges, you start to have some insight about, like, yeah, what is really standing in my way? What excuses am I giving myself, in a sense, right? Sure. Why am I holding myself back from this goal? And then at an appropriate time, I go like, okay, Jules, what do you want to do about that? What options do you think you have? And then we start generating some options. And as the coach, I want to help you evaluate, like generate a couple of options and evaluate those options. So you might say, well, I could join a gym, or I could get an indoor bike, or I could start doing yoga on YouTube, with YouTube, or whatever. And I'm okay, great. Well, let's talk about those. Which of those options inspires you most? Where would you like to start? You know, all that kind of thing. So we would explore the options. And then at the end of my coaching session, I go to the W, which stands for what's next, or the way forward. And I go, okay, are you ready? Like, do you feel like you really want to do this? And by this time, you should be not only energized about your goal, but you should be pretty focused on what it is that you want to do and how to get around those barriers that you've created, in a sense, right? Or that exist. And so then we talk about the way forward. I go, so what is your plan, Jules? When will you start? What are you going to do? And you say, I'm going to go to YouTube right now, and I'm going to find, you know, 3 15-minute yoga classes that I like, and that is what I'm going to do today. And then tomorrow I'm going to play one of those 15-minute yoga classes. And I say, okay, great. And how are you going to hold yourself accountable to this? Or do you want me to check in with you tomorrow night? I want to see what YouTube video you downloaded and how it went, you know. So all I'm doing is supporting you in figuring out your own answers. So it sounds easy when it comes to a fitness goal or something. It can be a little bit harder when there's other barriers in place, like the goal it has to be done, but it's not that attractive to you, or this or that. So we're going to talk through all of that. But we just want you to know that right now, as a result of coming to this webinar, we want you to get started. Go to that handout, to the slide supplement, read the questions, practice those questions, use them, you know, do a little hypothetical coaching session with somebody in your household or in your life today and see what happens. And by all means, you can always reach out to me at claire@clairelaughlinonline.com and let me know how it goes, or look me up on LinkedIn, Claire Laughlin, and connect with me there, because I love to have these conversations and I'd love to be a support to any of you.
That was great. Well, you inspired me.
Oh, good.
Thank you. Yeah, it's true. I mean, it just helps because we think about these goals, be, personal or professional, and it's like, yep, I want to do this, I want to do this, but we have to actually stop and just take a little time to really think that through. And with that model, it gives us that framework, and the accountability piece is great. So if it's fitness and you have a fitness buddy, like I'm doing something with my son-in-law right now, it's like, tell me, what cool, healthy recipe you found today, or, different things like that. It's really helpful, and it makes it more fun and achievable. So same thing can happen at work, right? There's always opportunities, but I like that you said practice with somebody in your household, because I think if people are a little hesitant, it's like, okay, here's a safe place, right? Let's do this and move it forward.
First step is just to practice, just to draw your attention to being a better listener and asking more questions.
Right.
To be present in your mind and being a better listener and asking more questions. Like, that is a really, really foundational skill that will help you in every relationship you have in your whole life. So it helps you make better decisions. It helps you make better connections. It helps in so many ways. It's astounding. So be a better listener, pay attention to the busy mind, ask more questions, be more curious, and then add this framework. And that's a really, really great place to start, a really powerful place to start.
Absolutely. And the thing I like about your courses, and just, even this discussion today, is a lot of these theories can be used in your personal life as well. So very important at work, during your leadership. It's a way to grow.
Yes.
But I'm constantly going, oh yeah, that would be a great way to tackle this in my personal life as well.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Yes, if there are questions that we didn't get to, Jules, is there a way that we can, I know I like to answer questions on my website. You can actually go to my blog as well, where and in my resource page, where I actually answer questions all the time, and you can go in there and use keyword searches, and you can find answers to a lot of questions in there. So again, it's clairelaughlinonline.com, and then you just go up to the top and click the resource button. But I'd be happy to answer some of these and do little short, I try to do like 1 or 2 minute video answers and just post them. So by all means, that's another way, or you can reach out to me by email, and that's all good.
That's beautiful. They can also put their questions in the survey at the end, and we can connect you at that point. And, in case we missed anyone, or we get done with this and someone thinks, oh my goodness, I wish I would have asked this.
Yeah.
That's another opportunity. So you've given them a lot of different ways to touch base with you. So I really appreciate that. It's always great to meet with you, and appreciate your enthusiasm and encouragement. And I know a lot of times this sounds easier than going through it, but honestly, like anything, if you think of any of your goals and objectives, in the nonprofit world, it might be just daunting at first, and then you dive in and you do it, and it's like, oh, this is great. So I really encourage folks to really take this to heart and give it a shot. I think it can be so impactful, as you shared.
Yeah,
So,
let's turn your mission into really powerful action, right? That's what fires me up about working with nonprofits. Take that mission of yours and let's turn it into really powerful action.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you'll have happier workforce, and it's hard, especially right now. I think, like you said, this is a time to really pause and do this for ourselves too. It's hard to see that when you're just overwhelmed and burnt out. But you could look at it as self-care in a way too, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It pairs well with delegating. There's so many ways it can make your work life, your culture, a happier, higher energy workplace. So that's what we want, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Build that trust, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Have a happier workforce, and you hopefully have less turnover, and
yeah,
you can do. Well, thank you so much, Claire. Thank you, everyone, for these great questions and your participation. It always makes our webinars that much more fun and powerful for us. So we appreciate that, and you know, appreciate having you, Claire. It's been such a pleasure, and we'll look forward to next time.
Sounds great. Thanks,
Yeah.
Jules.
Great. Thank you so much, Max. Do you have anything else for us today?
No, thank you.
Okay, all right. Well, so if everyone can watch for the survey, we'll look forward to your input. We always appreciate it. And as I said, if you have additional questions, pop them in there too, and let us know if you need HR credits. Those of us in HR love our HR credits. So, all right. Have a really wonderful day. Thank you so much, Claire. Thanks, Mac, for your help as well.
Bye.
Bye.